The vast majority of Morningside students, the vast majority of Morningside residents expect us to build a school out there, a new air-conditioned high school. A lot of them moved to that area with the understanding there would be a high school built, and the Fort Worth Board of Education intends to build it unless prevented by court order. As a matter of fact, we have already added $1 million to the program to take care of rising costs of labor and materials, and to ensure that the high school proposed for the Morningside area is a first-class high school. Although the petition is filled with inaccuracies, it does serve one useful purpose. But because of it, we will be able to resolve the question of whether we will be allowed to build a high school in the Morningside area. And we'll do this at the preliminary design stage instead of when the building is half constructed.
Generally, what were the results that you got? How did they differ from Mr. McKee's survey?
Mr. McKee's survey said that 19% of the students here at Hillcrest were using marijuana. Ours says 15% have tried marijuana.
Do you feel that's a significant difference, the 4%?
I feel it is, because if a student tries to go and find a job and he comes from a school where 1 out of every 5 students is on hard drugs, then his chances are very poor. When I say hard drugs, this is the way it looked like to the general public. Do you or have you taken ever LSD? 3% yes, 97% no. Would you like to try marijuana? Would you like to try LSD? Would you like to try marijuana? Would you like to try LSD if it were safe? Marijuana if it were safe also. The majority of these students said no. When asked if they were curious about it, it was an even 50-50. The next questions: would you like the experience if there were no danger? What are your reasons for doing it, such as to escape reality and for the trip effect? They said no. Have you ever thought about trying? Only 64% of the students said yes. Do you believe the reports that it is bad for you? 80% yes. On the Crime Commission survey, I feel their approach was entirely wrong. Most students, my friends, came up to me and just said it was a farce. There was a friend of mine who was the head of his Methodist Youth Fellowship who answered every question, yes, I do. On our survey, we made sure that the students were answering this correctly. We tried to, at least. We cannot say that they did answer it definitely correctly, but there were traps in the questionnaire, and it was presented in a very serious mood. I don't believe there was any student who would walk out of there and say that he lied.
How has the McKee survey affected the students at Hillcrest?
Many students were very angry when this report came out. Many felt very bad about it. Many had gone downright to using some language about this whole situation. We made sure that students weren't trying to get revenge when they filled out this survey by answering it wrong.
The allegations by the NAACP are not true. The court suit as listed, in which we have a copy, does not state the facts as they now exist. When the first federal court hears again the answers to these untrue allegations, perhaps we can get on with our program by providing quality education for our Morningside community. Apparently, Mr. Davis does not want Morningside to have a high school that is a new, air-conditioned, carpeted, and in the latest educational concept. He, Mr. Davis, apparently wants the Morningside pupils to continue to travel a great distance to attend high school, which is a major factor in causing children to drop out of school in this community. We're trying to meet the needs of this community and its children, and we intend to continue our efforts to provide quality education in Morningside as well as the remainder of our city.
it's been suggested we use paper ballots, but I think this is a step backwards. We will use, the commissioners will make the punch card devices available. They will be used, and the county clerk and the election board this morning, which you saw, I felt like was the most harmonious, at least first meeting, and I think we'll have a good election with the cooperation of the county clerk. The county clerk is the most important one in this, and I would hope that he would assume the responsibility of holding the election on both the device and the machine.
Several people at the meeting this morning expressed concern about the public confidence in the election, and everybody said that they were going to promote the confidence of the election. How can this be done, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, we hope that we can use the devices in the same voting precinct that these people are familiar with, and they have a lot of confidence in this device. We're going to modify the cards to where there are better material in the cards. The counting, where it's been mentioned that a close race cannot be counted, I disagree with this, that we can use a counter and not a computer to count this particular race. Just count two holes, 27 and 28, for instance. And on a regular counter, it doesn't have to be a computer.
Wouldn't this just mass waste together even more so?
No, because again, the biological system shows you that it's just because we are so highly concentrated that we can take care of our waste. The input and output of the human body or anybody, any organism, is so perfect, it's so great that we can not only survive but develop and free our minds somehow.
How and who would decide how the open spaces are to be preserved and used, the ones that surround the cities you talk about?
Well, the city government.
How would you decide overlapping jurisdictions?
Right, see, there are two things you have to keep in mind. One is feasibility, and the other is desirability. If something is desirable, you're going to find the answers. If something is just feasible but not desirable, then it doesn't matter to have the answers. So I'm not here to give you all the answers. I'm suggesting that if what I'm suggesting is desirable, then we have to find the answers.
By traditional news standards, this may not be a very current story, but somehow in this jet age of rush and worry, perhaps it has a place. The story is about a man named Uncle Gus Wilson. He's buried here. According to the legend of which is evolved here in Collin County, Uncle Gus was a strange sort of man. They say he never combed his hair, shaved, or had his picture taken. What he did mostly was parlay a small, poor dirt farm into $1 million. Then he gave it all away. Gus made his money by buying up farmland and railroad stock. For many years he lived as a virtual recluse. He never married. As far as anybody remembers, he never even went with a girl. But oddly enough, in his declining years, Uncle Gus went on a strange giveaway spree. He started by occasionally giving a tract of land to some struggling young farmer. One day in downtown McKinney, he gave 10 McKinney teenagers $2,000 each for their college education. Within one 3-month period, he gave away 50 automobiles. In his latter years, Uncle Gus' only companion was a mongrel dog named Joe. And when he died in 1935, at age 90, he insisted on being buried in this family plot here, now overgrown by vines, beside Joe. And just as brush and vine have covered the grave of Joe and Uncle Gus, time has dimmed the legend, and a lot of prominent people in and around McKinney seem to have forgotten they got that way because of a start from Gus Wilson. This is Tommy Ayers in McKinney for Channel 8 News.
Well, I had an opportunity this morning to go out and visit the General Dynamics plant. I was very anxious to see the procedure that they have undertaken to make sure that the airframe is structurally sound before it's released for flight. I was very impressed with what I saw out there. They've gone into a thorough testing program, and in the process they've developed some new testing procedures. And I saw one of the planes in the cold chamber with the hydraulic fixtures to bend the wings, and I was impressed by how much of a strain they put on those wings. They're going to bend them so the tips will move up something like 4 feet, and I think if the planes will take this test, they're going to be a pretty safe plane.
Well, first, we're explaining the President's program for minority business enterprise to them. Secondly, covering in some depth and detail 2 programs. First is helping them learn and understand how to bid on federal government business. And secondly, explaining to them a preferential procurement program that we have for minorities and other disadvantaged individuals. The purpose of the latter program is to provide a initial boost so that the firms can either come into being or can expand and become viable businesses in the economic life of American industry.
Is it strictly an economic thing, or do we actually need the small businessmen in the government procurement program? Can they play a vital part?
Well, not only can they, but they do. This is essentially a minority business thing, but all of them are small business, and to that extent, it's interrelated as a small business effort.
I have a very simple personal view, and that is, don't invoke arms unless you intend to use arms for a successful and rapid termination of conflict. Using arms in some sort of a gradualism or some kind of a holding operation with limitations that the enemy can clearly see that he can exploit. This brings out the worst aspects of military action. So I come back to my original point. Don't start a war unless you intend to carry it through to a successful finish, and use the reasonable means to do so, and don't vacillate.
Admiral, I believe you used the phrase a reasonable conclusion in Vietnam. Does that mean then that you would consider a reasonable conclusion the winning of the war?
Well, that would be the most reasonable, in my opinion. A reasonable conclusion is one in which we don't abandon the South Vietnamese to their fate, in my view. An unreasonable conclusion of the war would be to just bug out.
Would you call some of the tactics political bossism?
I'd call them Tammany Hall. That's what they appeared to me to be. And all new precinct chairmen like myself find this to be the case when they go to a Dallas County Executive Committee meeting. They're castigated if in any way they disagree with the chair.
How many Republican delegates would agree with you in this position?
I think in that convention, had they known what the stakes were, had they been able to be advised as to what the crucial issues were, I think they would have overwhelmingly voted with us. They did in '68 when these rules were called to their attention. They amended them.
Are you trying to say also then that new delegates to the Republican convention are stifled?
Yes, because of a lack of communication. This is the way the party headquarters affects their desires. They keep the people from knowing what's going on, and therefore all they can do is say aye or nay, and they don't really know what the issues are. And it's not that they're not intelligent, but they're not advised. They're not communicated with. And we got to open up the party if they're ever going to know what the issues are. And this is the essence of this movement. And we're just starting to open it up, and we're bound and determined to do it.
Professor Grinspoon spoke about the evidence that marijuana does not lead to the harder drugs, and he quoted a Harvard colleague of his, and I corrected him during this program. Unfortunately, my correction was deleted from the program, so it appeared as though Greenspan's statement stood without my opposition. The fact of the matter was that a Harvard colleague of his had announced to the newspapers the day that I arrived in Boston a month ago, saying that he had studied 61 marijuana users for 2 years and that there was absolutely no evidence of progression to harder drugs. I called him up and found that he had only studied 35 marijuana users, not for 2 years, but 6 months, and that during this time, 9 of them had used LSD, some of them multiply, and 2 had tried heroin, so that the information that Greenspoon had quoted was exactly to the opposite point, and I made this in reply to Greenspoon on the television program, but my reply was deleted. And since this is a very important topic about the question as to whether there is progression, I am glad for this opportunity to make this correction.
Dr. Jones, why do people progress to a harder drug? Why not stay with marijuana? Why would they use heroin or LSD?
Now, the reason for this depends upon the personal evangelism of those that like a particular drug and introduce it to their friend. This is how it always spread, and there is no other way that the drug culture spreads. But not only does a kind of drug spread in this way, but the actual mode of administration of the drug depends upon how it is presented from one person to another. And the transfer from marijuana to amphetamines, to LSD, to barbiturates, and to heroin is all distinctly measurable and creating a national crisis at the present time, well beyond the problems that are created by marijuana alone.
I think the most important problem here is that the repressive tactics of the mayor and of the white community in this nation can be clearly seen as the mayor of this city uses the city power structure to take land away from black people for private developers. But I am sure that the city of Dallas does not need a parking lot so bad that it has to steal the land of its black citizens, and I'm sure that there's something else involved in it. But I understand that the mayor of this community is not a poor man, that he's a millionaire, and that he has economic interests which more than likely will be served if this land is taken away from black people. That being the case, then the mayor should be questioned as to what he's doing. And in the fourth place, I don't care where the citizens live, the mayor has an obligation to go to where they live and meet with them. And he shouldn't be making excuses about a time schedule. He has no time if he's the elected mayor of this community. His time belongs to black citizens, and what he should be doing is trying to get to where those citizens are. If he does not have the ability to do that, then it's time for Dallas, Texas to have another mayor, and somebody needs to get on that case and start working to elect somebody who will really represent people.
The Action Now rally against drug abuse here at the Cotton Bowl perhaps was not the success that its promoters anticipated, at least from a figure standpoint. There were not 70,000 young people here, more like 15 to 17,000. However, they were very enthusiastic. Pat Boone began the festivities and introduced a man who is loved by millions of Americans, John Wayne. He had these comments for the young people assembled.
But the last Academy Award nights, a few 100 million people expressed their love through the Motion Picture Academy to this man, an American, John Wayne.
It's easy to be afraid in the world today. Life is pretty complicated. Technology has put us in a computer age, and I'm sure there are times when everyone has a feeling that it's too tough to face up to. And that's where we need God.
Well, I'm deeply concerned about this. Those people who use violence as a vehicle to disagree, to dissent, or to try to destroy any effort that other people are making in this country makes it a very sad day indeed. We've seen Texas in the past few weeks threatened with many various forms of violence. I think people are going to have to realize we're going to enforce the law in Texas, and people who would plant a bomb or even use a threat to try to break up this rally are people who should be prosecuted by the law.
These young people could have been fishing, swimming, or just riding around or staying at home. Instead, they came to the Cotton Bowl to the tune of about 17,000 strong. It was a success. Art Sinclair for Channel 8 News.
When I told him about the concert, and a couple of girls came down and presented him with tickets hoping he would be there, he really was speechless. Big tears came into his eyes, and he couldn't say anything. I think it's given him new hope.
A course record
How do you feel after playing at 63 today?
Well, a little numb right now. That's of course lower than I ever hoped to shoot on a course like this. I was very fortunate today. I made a lot of putts, and I hit some good shots, and I hit a few bad shots, but I was able to recover every time, and I'm just real happy.
What about this course? It's almost impossible to play this course in anything under a 66, they tell me, yet you did it with ease today. Is the course in that good a shape?
No, I didn't do it with ease, but it is in beautiful shape. The course, the wind didn't blow, and the greens were beautiful. I was in the second group off, which means there hadn't been too many feet messing the greens up, and the greens were perfect, and the fairways are absolutely perfect also. I said this after my 75 on Thursday too, that the course is beautiful. So it wasn't because I shot 63 that I'm saying that, but this was a perfect day.
Is this going to give you impetus to move ahead stronger and possibly come up with another good round tomorrow and maybe win this tournament?
Well, we hope so.